It's hard. I think this is a hard play to describe without giving too much away. So I'm going to let you do it. How would you describe this play?
I'll describe it as he describes himself. It's a satirical survey of African American culture and identity. That's succinctly what it is. And a description of blacks in a contemporary America. So, in a nutshell, that's what it is. It's a series of 11 exhibits. All they're not related, but they're related in how they're structured. And but yeah, that's what it is. It's really, and it's a hard-hitting production, hard-hitting play. There's some serious subjects matter being discussed and thrown on the table for discussion, and after audiences leave, that this will create some conversation. And if you don't talk about it, I think you may have missed the point. But it's hard to sit through sometimes, but it's funny. So it takes you through these, as Lala says in her, my black white behind it. So it's like it takes you and slaps you around for a bit, and then lets you off, and then does it again. So, but yeah, it's very satirical, and it's very hard hitting.
It slaps you around
Yes.
for a bit. You laugh and then it slaps you in the
Yeah.
face. It's it's a hard one to watch in a good way.
Yes.
Even though it premiered in the 80s, one thing that struck me about it is how relevant it is to right now. So, how does the play speak to contemporary audiences and what we're going through now as a country?
Yeah. One of the directors here, when we decided we're going to do this show, said to me, "God, this is so political." I'm like, from whose perspective is it political? It depends on which eye you're looking at it. From a black perspective, it's simply, this is who we are, and these are the issues that affect us that America doesn't look at. They don't. There's some talk now, but I relate it this way. If you have a problem, and a mental problem or something, you go to someone to talk that through. We haven't talked it through yet. We keep covering up and, oh, let's not deal with that. We can't talk about that. When are we going to talk about it? And that's what I see contemporary America, how it relates now. You can go in individual exhibits and see, you talk about Black Lives Matter, black men being killed, and just all of this craziness that's happening. But yeah, it's like, when are we going to talk about it? And you have to allow people to talk about what they're going through in order, if you're ever going to get through it and get over it and to move on, because that's what everybody wants to, well, let's just move on. Well, you can't move on because we're, as Lady in Plaid says, here I am, stuck being colored in a world that values neither. And so that's, from that black perspective, that's what you feel. And America, we need to talk about it. And we don't need to run from it. We need to simply deal with it head on.
I feel like we're living in a time, though, where my father is a hobbyist historian, I'm gonna say. And one thing we talk about a lot is that right now people are trying to erase history.
Yeah.
We're trying to erase history, change our American history, reinvent our American history. And this play is all about owning your history. Yes. And in one article I said, honoring your cultural baggage. Why is it important for people to honor the past, remember the past, not forget?
Because if you forget the past, you are doomed to repeat it again. It's really that simple. It really bothers me when, if you think about the Holocaust, you can't forget that. and people will not let you forget it. Why is that? What is the difference between that and slavery? What's the difference? Millions of people were killed, put into bondage, and forced to work. I mean, it was just, what is the difference? What is the difference between a Jewish person and an African American person? Or any other person of any other ethnicity where they're being, it's just...
Oppressed.
Yes. And we just, because you change something and you say, okay, we're not going to talk about it, it still doesn't alleviate the problem. Is you just you whitewashing, you putting a Band-Aid on it, but the underlying is still there.
The wounds are still there.
And until we deal with it. Who has a problem and then just says, okay, gets a diagnosis from a doctor and says, well, you have cancer. Whoa, I just won't deal with it. You still have the cancer, and until you deal with the cancer, it's really simple.
It should be really simple.
Yeah, but
it's
it
not.
Should be. No, but really it is. I think it is really simple. So there's sometimes when you just, I'm going to relate this to our staff here. We have discussions about diversity and things like that. I'm like, guys, we talk a good game. We want to be diverse in this, we want to do this, da. But so if you want to do that, then there's one really simple way to do it. Is just do it. You have to. There comes a time where you have to simply make a decision that this is what we say we want, and this is what we need to do to get it, and just do it. Just turn from what we are doing, and just do it. It's difficult for people to do that. The solution is not difficult.
It's difficult for white people to do that, I think. I'm going to say it as a white person, as a white woman. I think it's very difficult for
I understand that.
People
but
to do that.
Because it's difficult for a white person, the solution is not difficult. It's you taking the action to do the.
It's on right.
Yeah.
It's a right. It's on us, which is one of the reasons I love this play so much, because it is discomforting. It makes you uncomfortable in a good way and makes you examine yourself. And that's going to be a very different experience for white audiences and black audiences. What do you hope the white audiences coming to see this show are going to get out of it?
One, I get the satire of the piece. I've always thought this was a good vehicle to put the history of African Americans on display. Mm-hmm. So even in school today, these subjects aren't talked about. I mean, that's my understanding. They're just not. And so we were talking, the cast, and so they were asking, well, who knows anything about minstrelsy? I don't know what that is. So we're dealing even with African Americans who don't know about some of the history of our culture. So if they don't understand it, I know the white culture doesn't understand it, and so hopefully this will introduce some to, wow, that's interesting. The original production that we did here didn't have all of the projections that we have now. I wanted to make sure that the people that were mentioned in the show, there were images of those people, so they could put faces to it, and then maybe going, let me look up this person they talked about, da-da-da-da. But at least a starting ground. Let me learn more about this culture, about this people.
And you kind of answered this, but what do you hope people of color will get out of it? And because we're on a college campus, you're going to have I'm assuming you're going to have a young audience as well coming to see this. So what do you hope these different audiences?
I hope pretty much the same thing. I mean, for African American students, a sense of pride I mean, just simply a sense of pride. I mean, just to think about it. Your people go through all of this oppression, all of this just beat down and beat down and beat down. But at the end of the day, everything has been thrown at you. You've survived it and you flourish, as Normal Gene says in Permutations. And my babies are gonna fly, fly, fly. There's so much pride in who we are. I mean, we come from kings and queens, back in Africa. And just because somebody has this sort of this, it still doesn't define you. It has nothing to do with who you are and the power and the strength that resides within you as a person. So I hope they will take this and say, okay, yeah, we did that, but look at us now. I mean, I have that strength to move on and whatever I want to do, whatever I want to become, even though there's stumbling blocks placed in the way, that still doesn't limit me.
We talked about the play. The play premiered 1986, published 1987. The final scene is really a contemporary scene, so let's assume it's a 1980s scene, although I didn't really feel like it was a 1980s scene, but let's say that's where the play ends. If it were going to be updated, if you could sit down with George C. Wolfe and say, hey, we need one extra scene to reflect on the 90s or the early 2000s, what would that scene be? What would that character look like? What would that exhibit look like?
It would probably still look the same way. It really would, because it's really about, she talks about these contradictions, these people, and there are people who just in an everyday existence, you wouldn't see these people together. Aunt Jemima and Eartha Kitt. I mean, so it could be anybody. It could be Barack Obama and who?
Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting.
Yeah. So what I take from that is that we are all of these people. We talk about intersectionality. So that's what I see when we see this last thing. It's intersectionality. I am not just A. I'm not just B. I'm just not C. But I'm A, B, C, X, Y, Z. All of those things in one person. So all of those people that we see in that last exhibit are all of us. And so we draw from the characteristics of this person or that person, and when we need to. And so I don't really. I had the opportunity to update it, but I didn't really want to go through and have to rewrite the whole show. But because if you do one, then you've got to do the other. And I just made the decision to leave it where it was and make those ties and those references so that it's timeless.